So can you recall what were the arguments in Birsa Singh's case by the defense? What did it say? How was it reading clause 3 or section 300 for that matter? Anyone who wants to articulate? Yes, Nirupa?
Ma'am, the defense was basically that 300 clause 3 says that that the act should be sufficient to cause death. But the defendant argued that whether it was sufficient or not, it was more likely than sufficient. So that was their defense, that it was a culpable homicide and not a murder case.
Okay. So two separate arguments. One argument is by reference to first part of 300, in which because of which they said that it cannot be said, section, he said the conviction for murder can happen only if the prosecution proves that the only inference possible is that death has been caused by the accused person, is the only inference possible. There is no other inference possible. The fact that the victim was beaten up on non-vital parts, it cannot be said on that fact that the only inference was that he intended death. And if he did not intend death, certainly the conviction cannot come for murder. Deepika, you want to say something? Your hand is up.
No, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am. It's just I wanted to present the argument for the sake.
Okay. And the second argument is that when the accused person gave, the clause says that the injury, the first part of 300 says he intended to cause injury, and then says that the injury intended to be caused is sufficient in ordinary course of nature. So the defense argued that the injury must be such as the accused person knows that it is sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause death. And that is the line which was taken in Kapoor Singh also, that he did not know, the only thing we could impute was that he had the knowledge that it was certainly likely to cause death. Sorry, I was confusing the two facts. So then in Birsa Singh, it was one bhala. So with one bhala, it cannot be said, the only inference is not necessary that he intended to cause injury. And secondly, it cannot be also, the prosecution has not proved that he had intended to cause the injury which was sufficient sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause death. So to that, the judges were saying, we need to understand the difference between firstly and thirdly. So they said, if any person is intending to cause such bodily injury as is likely to cause death, then he is intending to cause murder. He's intending to cause death intentionally. And therefore, that case will squarely fall in the first category, in first of 300. Thirdly of 300 has to be understood by reference to the section that we have, the language. So first they're divided. Let me share the PPT again with you.
Isn't the section 1 common in both of them, the intention to cause death?
No, because in case of first, there is intention to cause death, but in thirdly, there is no such, this thirdly does not say intention to cause death. It only says intention to cause injury, and the injury intended, the bodily injury intended to be inflicted is sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause death. So what the Supreme Court...
asking about clause, section 299 clause 1 and 300 clause 1. Aren't both of them saying the same?
100% same, 100% same. So if the case fell into that category of 299 first, we don't have to ask any more question, and we can say it is falling under 291 and therefore it is murder, because the same language has been used in 300. But in this case, the argument was that neither 299 firstly proved, and therefore certainly no question of applying firstly of 300. 299 first says intention, does an act with intention to cause death. The same words are used in the second one. So therefore, so we said that three categories of 299. So if any activity which has caused death, if it falls into first category, the whole of it will go to this category of murder. In the second and third category of 299, it is the more grave nature of the things, circumstances in which death has been caused, either intentionally or with the knowledge, that it will qualify, it will upgrade itself and become murder. So in this case, the court also said that nobody is saying he had the intention to cause death. We cannot say that for certainty. He may have, he may not have. The moment there is a doubt as to what was the intention, then certainly firstly cannot apply. First part of 299 can also not apply. But merely because first part does not apply does not mean that the conviction for culpable homicide or murder will not come. So that's what we have to understand, that just because somebody so when just 1 second. I'm trying to remove some obstacle on my screen so that you can see the full window, and I'm not able to, so I was trying to do that. Okay, now I think it is gone. There we are. So we have to understand that intention to cause death, causing death with the intention to cause death, is not the only category of murder. There are others also. So the first argument is accepted, that he cannot be held liable by reference to either 299 first part or first part of the 300, because the only inference possible, let's go back to the statement he has made earlier, defense argument 1. Defense argument 1 was, remember what first thing was, that when do we say there is intention to cause death? When the only inference possible from the circumstance was that there was an intention to cause death. So if one bhala blow has been given, can we say with certainty that there is no other explanation? We cannot say, no, maybe he wanted to cause death, maybe he did not want to cause death. The moment there is a possibility, two inferences are possible, then there was intention to inflict a bodily injury, that was sufficient. And the second one, intention that the section requires must be related not only to the injury inflicted, but also to the clause and the bodily injury intended to be inflicted is sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause death. So in order to argue for the first one, when we say that whether he can be held liable under the first part, we have also said earlier, in my earlier slide I've shown you, we have said that the only inference possible in these circumstances, if it is that yes, there can be no other explanation excepting that he intended to cause death. In this case, when this one bhala blow was given, can we say, how many of you would think that yes, the only inference possible in these circumstances is that he intended to cause death? Are we certain that that's the only intention? Or can we say that maybe Maybe he only intended to cause injury, but not death. So if the inference is maybe, then firstly is not attracted. But that does not mean charge for murder is gone. Charge for murder.
Ma'am, you are on mute.
But yeah, I got disconnected, so I'm back again. And let me start the sharing of the PPT again. So what we were saying was that one, the argument that it is not proved by the prosecution that they had the intention to kill or that he had the intention to inflict such bodily injury as was sufficient to cause death. So second argument we look at by reference to section thirdly of 300. First one we're saying that how many of you in this case would think that if one bhala blow is given causing this kind of injury, we can say that the only inference possible in the circumstances that the accused person intended to cause death. If we think that some of us, but maybe most of us, would have a sense that maybe he intended to cause death, maybe he not. But what is
Of
sure,
course, he intended to cause death of the person. I mean, he is throwing a spear on the other person. What else is necessary to bring upon the death of a person? If someone is uh, uh, firing bullets or cannons at other person, what are we supposed to assume the intention of the person?
because what we do not have is what is the length of the the head of the spear, what kind of spear it is. All those details are not there. And even if, and what we do know is that the nature of injury which has been caused. But if this one bhala blow is given to somebody
Material is a
without
different
without
thing.
looking at the nature of the injuries caused, can we say that he had intended to cause death by giving only one bhala blow?
No, ma'am, I
Ma'am,
think no,
the
because
No,
bhala
ma'am.
could also be at leg also. He throw the bhala, okay? Might be he was to throw on his leg, but it go beyond the leg and it go
That
in the
is
abdomen
that
part.
that is not the argument given by the defense to that no, he intended to give the bhala blow on something else and it fell on the leg. Because if that happened, then even thirdly will not be attracted. So in this case, the argument is not that he intended to cause some other injury. But
ma'am,
when
I think the
blow is given,
injury and Ma'am, I think the injury and the weapon doesn't, weapon size and all the intricacies doesn't matter at all. He was throwing a damn spear, and the only intention could be to bring about the death. What happened later is a different thing, but the intention was to cause kill of the person. He was throwing a
no,
spear at him.
no, because when you look at if somebody gets four forceful blows on the head without even just a thick lathi, one can say that the fact that the repeated blows were given on the vital part, the intention was to cause death. But in this case, one blow has been given, though it has been given in the stomach, and it could have no. The one phala blow cannot. I do not know. I mean, that's what I also feel. I agree with the judge's perception that with just one bhala blow, what is clear is because of the force of the bhala blow, because of the manner in which the injury has been caused, bringing out intestine also. It's not only bhala blow given, but it has been taken out also. So it's not that there's a piercing, but taking out also has happened. So certainly the person intended to cause very, very serious injury. This much is for 100% sure. But whether with that injury he wanted to cause death or not, that is doubtful in my appreciation of the facts. So, and the test for us is to determine if you want to argue. Nobody stops you from arguing that no, this one bhala blow itself shows that there was intention to cause death because one bullet injury certainly is a clear case. But also, if you are giving one bullet, if you what do you call that as air gun, if you are kind of firing an air gun, and I do not know exactly actually that whether air gun is as fatal as the other, a revolver bullet will be. So if the kind of injuries which are caused by air gun are different, and I assume they would be, so if they're less fatal, but this person actually has died because of the manner in which it was, maybe he fired a number of shots at the person. So even though the one air gun shot may not have killed, but they were sufficient, and this is kind of danger. So one has to. The test is right. When Nirupam argues that no one bhala blow is sufficient because of the injury, you can take that argument. Whether the judge will be convinced or not is a separate question. But the line of argument is correct that when we are asking conviction under firstly, we have to use these words that he could reasonably foresee the consequences of the thrust with which he gave this bhala, the injuries he caused, that there is no other possible inference excepting causing death. People may agree with you, they may not agree with you. In case the judge does not agree with you, you can still ask conviction under thirdly also, that even if you're not convinced that the only inference possible is that he had intended to cause death, what is not questionable in this case is that he did intend to cause bodily injury. So there's no disagreement on that aspect. So the moment we take that position, then we have to fulfill the requirement of thirdly. And the thirdly, the first part, the person also did not object to, that he did not intend to cause this injury, he intended to cause something else. So that even the defense is not arguing. Yeah, we intend, no, this was the injury. But the conviction cannot be under 302, cannot be said that it is fulfilling the requirement of thirdly of 300, because the thirdly says, and the defense is emphasizing on the part that the intention has to be such, intention has to be to cause such bodily injury as are sufficient to cause death. And that is where the clarification has come in this case. So the judges are saying the whole thirdly first divide into two parts. If it is done with the intention of causing bodily injury to any person, this part is satisfied in this case. Then how do we understand the second part? Second part, the defense is saying it means that the bodily injury which the accused intended to inflict, he should know that it is sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause death. Judges have objected to this using of the words he should know, that he should have intended to cause such bodily injury as is sufficient in the ordinary course. What the judges said was that in this case, also the second part has to be is actually divisible into two parts. One, the first part is the bodily injury intended to be inflicted. So this is saying relates back to the first part. So this, when you go back on this one, can you see my cursor? Can you see the cursor?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So this part, this whole part is and the bodily injury intended to be inflicted. This part relates back to this part. That it is only describing that because the injury has to be caused intentionally. And therefore, this injury which was intended to be caused, this has to be sufficient, but this will not be, it has nothing to do with the knowledge of the accused person. This has to be an objective inquiry. So going further on this, on the judge's clarification, the first part describes the earlier part of the section, namely the infliction of the bodily injury with the intention to inflict it. If the circumstances justify the inference that the person intended to cause a different injury, which Tushar was mentioning, that he intended to cause injury on the arm, he wanted to cause injury on the leg, but by whatever change of circumstances, by accident, the blow had landed on the heart. So then it is saying that he intended to cause the first part, the earlier part said, the bodily injury intended to inflict. So the intended injury was on the arm. But it actually is not the bodily injury which is found on the body is not the one which was intended. And so if the body, so there are two things. One is that what I intended and what I caused. I intended to cause injury on the arm, but I ended up causing injury on the heart. So therefore, the injury found on the body is not the one which I intended. So what is agreeing is that yes, the accused intended to cause an injury, but the injury found on the body is a different one than the intended injury. So if the inference is that the person intended a different injury, but a different one has been found, then we are not going further, because the injury found on the person should be the same as was intended. In that case, the first part of the clause does not come into play, because it is saying that this is describing the earlier part in which said that he should have intended to cause bodily injury. And then they are saying, so we'll look at this and I think things will become a little clear if you go by the test they have written down. Hold on,
Ma'am,
hold
if
on.
we allow,
Hold on, Nirupam. Hold on for a second. Let's go through the test they have said, and maybe things will become a little clearer. But once it is proved that there was an intention to inflict the injury that is found to be present, then the second part becomes relevant. We need to prove that the injury found was also sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause death. So they say that it is agreed that it is not enough to prove that the injury found to be present is sufficient in the ordinary course of nature. It must also be proved, it must also be shown, that the injury found on the person was the intended injury. Whether it was sufficient to cause death in the ordinary course of nature, it's a matter of inference or deduction from the injuries proved about the nature of the injury and has nothing to do with the question of intention. So then the judges say that there are 4 steps for applying section 330. So first of all, there's an objective investigation. When we say objective, we are saying we are not going to find out what he knew or what he thought. First, it must be established quite objectively that a bodily injury is present on the deceased body. The second one, so this is an objective that the postmortem will tell us what all the injuries were there. Secondly, the nature of the injury. This also postmortem and the doctors will tell us what is the nature of the injury. The third, so these are, both of them are purely objective investigation by the medical people. Then we have to ask a subjective query. Subjective query to what was the person thinking. So thirdly, it must be proved that there was the intention to inflict that particular bodily injury. That is, that it was not accidental, it was not unintentional, or that some other kind of injury was intended. So it must be proved that the accused person intended to cause this very injury. So think of our films again. A gave a very hard blow to the other opponent, to the enemy. No, the villain. The hero gives a blow to the villain, and villain falls down. And we have seen this in many films. He falls down on a nail. So he just gets smashed on the wall, and there is a nail there, and he is pierced by the nail. So he has got an injury because of the action done by the accused person, by the hero in this case. But whether the injury found on the body of the deceased, and he dies of that nail injury. So can we say that this has been caused by the accused person? Whether it was an accident, if he knew there was a nail and he was kind of pushing him there, then certainly. But if he was paying more attention to fighting the bone here, rather than saying, well, where will he fall? He sometimes fall on a plowshare, sometimes he falls on some sharp object because of which the villain dies. So that is an accidental injury. So the injury found on the person is not the injury intended. He certainly intended to give him a blow, but he did not intend to give him an injury of the nail. So that is what the judges are saying, that at the thirdly level, at the third step, what we need to focus on is whether the injury which has been found is the one which was intended. And that is to say that it was not accidental or unintentional, or that some other kind of injury was intended. This is a subjective to the accused. What was the intention of the accused? Whether by giving that hard blow onto the on the villain, whether the hero knew that this is the injury which will be caused. If that is not in the scheme of things for him, sometimes we do know that the hero viciously throws him into the boiling cauldron. So then certainly he's intending that. But a lot of films show us scenes where accidentally he goes, the villain goes and gets nailed up. So that is not an intentional injury. So that is subjectively, the hero wanted to give another injury, but the villain got a different injury. So that will not fulfill the condition of the requirement of the section. Then the fourthly also is objective. So we had 2 tests which were objective, third test which was subjective, fourth is also objective. So they're saying so there was injury found, it has been caused by the accused person. The injury, so okay, let me go back. We had the first one, bodily injury is present, nature of the injury, and certainly we are talking about that the bodily injury present on the person has been caused by the accused person. So what is the nature of the injury? And the subjective part. Then comes the last part, which says it must be proved that the injury of the type just described, made up of the three elements set out above, is sufficient to cause death in the ordinary course of nature. So the second part is only describing that there is this intestine out, this is this much of what is the length and the breadth and the depth of the wound, all that is description. Then the consequence is in the fourth part, that is this injury sufficient to cause death in the ordinary course of nature. This part of the inquiry is purely objective and inferential and has nothing to do with the intention of the offender. So para 20 in this our case law says thirdly applies even if there was no intention to cause death. And that's where the distinction comes in. If there's intention to cause death, then firstly applies. If there was no intention even to cause an injury of a kind that is sufficient to cause the death in the ordinary course of nature, there is a real distinction between the two. So even if because the judge have already said that if there was intention to cause such bodily injury as is sufficient to cause death, then it actually is an instance of the firstly. And that's why they're saying that actually there's no difference in these two formulations. And there is no knowledge, it will still apply, there's no knowledge that the act of that kind was likely to cause death. So even if the accused has no knowledge, 303 will still apply. So what is the test? Once the intention to cause bodily injury actually found to be present is proved, then the rest of the inquiry, so this is the only inquiry which is subjective to the accused. All the other inquiries are purely objective, and the only question is whether, as a matter of purely objective inference, the injury is sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause death. So what is the rationale of saying that, no, we have to make a distinction? The judges said, so the rationale in the sense that, no, he did not know that it was sufficient to cause death. Why should he still be held liable for murder? So the judges are saying that no one has a license to run around inflicting injuries that are sufficient to cause death in the ordinary course of nature and claim that they are not guilty of murder. If they inflict injuries of that kind, they must face the consequences, and they can only escape if it can be shown or reasonably deduced that the injury was accidental or otherwise unintentional. Do we still have some questions on the scheme of this section? So what we have understood is, firstly is saying either clear intention to cause death, or we're saying intention to cause such bodily injury as the accused also knows are sufficient to cause death. It is one and the same thing. It will be firstly. But if there is a doubt whether the accused knew that these are sufficient to cause death or not, then we will examine thirdly. In thirdly, first we will ask what are the injuries present which have been caused by the accused person. Whether the accused intended to cause those very injuries. And then thirdly, independent of the accused's knowledge, by a medical examination, we want to know whether these injuries are sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause death. Sometimes the judges have also, even though the medical opinion was that it was sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause death, the person did not die for 7 days and he died later on, finally of it only. So judges have, when I said that medical opinion is only an opinion, judges are not bound by it. So this is one of the pieces of evidence the judges look at. Judges also look at a lot of other circumstances adjoining the offense to determine whether they will bring the conviction under 303. So for applying 303, what the judges are saying, that you have to go step by step. First of all, find out what is the injury on the person, and of course, injury has to be caused by the accused person. Then, whether accused intended to cause this very injury or not. Then, objectively, whether the injury is sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause death. So, in this case, there was no argument by the defense to say this was not the intended injury. The argument was based more on the second leg, second part of the clause, which said intended injury is sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause death. So the defense was saying this is a subjective test, whether the accused knew that it was sufficient to cause death. The judges said that no, we will not look into the subjective knowledge of the accused person. We will look at this fact objectively and determine. So now we still have some clarification to seek. Anupam was raising some questions. Do you still want to raise them? It is somewhat clear. We'll have another kind of explanation coming from the Supreme Court in the next case we have. Punaya. Then Punaya, does anyone know what are the facts?
Ma'am, in this, ma'am.
Yes, Yugal. I'll give 30 seconds to some younger student. If they don't speak, then you can speak, Yugal.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
So anyone from first year who has read the case, Punaya?
Ma'am, I will speak.
Okay, Tushar?
Yes, ma'am. So what happens is in this here is a person that it is about a village in which there are three particular castes which live, and they are all opponents and belonging to different parties. Okay, so what is Kotam Raju deceased was called upon a police station for some old dispute. So police station calls them. So one morning, he with his two friends, he moved into the bus and towards the Narikal police station. So 5 accused also followed him in the bus. When he reaches the Narikal crossroads at about 7:30 a.m., he with his one of the friends, he moves towards the Choltri, that is a living space that way, and the 5 accused also come down, and the accused, 2 of them accused collect some woods for beating them. So they take the heavy sticks and move towards the Choltri to beat them. They attacked the deceased indiscriminately, his legs and arms. One of bystanders was also a prosecution witness. He asked them to stop also, but they say, "Who are you to stop us?" So what they keep on beating on his legs and arms. So after that, the deceased was taken to the hospital and he becomes unconscious, and around 19 to 20 injuries happen, and around 7 bones were broken and 2 bones were dislocated from the space. So doctor said that injuries were sufficient in ordinary course of nature to cause death in this case also. So doctor came to see that he was going to die. So doctor called the magistrate, and with the permission of magistrate, he takes the dying declaration of the deceased, and in which dying declaration he names 5 accused. And the cause of the death was shock and hemorrhage. Shock was he was a bit shocked, and the hemorrhage means a lot of blood loss has been happened from the multiple injuries caused. This was the main case facts of the case.
Tushar, these are very detailed facts, and when we are giving facts, we should also learn gradually to do away with the unnecessary details, because that's only tax you. You will not remember all these details when you are writing for exam, and you will get into panic that I don't remember all the accused, I do not remember what village they come from. These are, for our purposes, we can certainly ignore those details. So while you have given us the detailed facts, we have to learn gradually what we call a sifting of the facts. What are the facts which are necessary for us to tell the story for our purpose? And certainly for different purposes, different details are required. So in this case, you mentioned about the cause of death being shock and hemorrhage. So go back, that's all that think about it. What was the case we studied on cause and effect? There are 4 categories of causes. So when the medical report says that the cause of death was shock and hemorrhage, what kind of cause is this? Do you remember the 4 causes? 4 categories of causes?
Yes, ma'am.
What are they?
Material cause, formal cause, sufficient cause, and final cause, ma'am.
Efficient, not sufficient, efficient cause.
Efficient cause.
So, yeah, so in this case, in this description of when it says it was by shock and hemorrhage, what is this? Is it the final cause, efficient cause? Which kind of cause is this?
I think it is effective cause because that is the most
Is final cause, ma'am.
probable circumstance. That is the most probable inference that can be drawn from what
There's a final cause of death. No? What was the most efficient cause of death in this case?
Ma'am, hemorrhage, too much blood flow that caused the death of the
No,
No, ma'am.
no.
Cumulative
Beating
injuries.
given by the accused person, the beating given by the people, by the accused persons. That's the most efficient cause. The fact that he died of the hemorrhage which happened, it can be either a formal cause or because it will be a formal cause. Then how because of the hemorrhage he stopped breathing will be the final cause. So keep connecting. Your knowledge should not go waste. It is not only for the purpose of that case. Knowledge you learn earlier. We learned objective test and subjective test in Palani Gaundan. Now we are back to objective subjective tests again in Virsa Singh also. So there will be connectedness, but you will find out that even though the tests are there, but these are not used uniformly in all cases. Sometimes the judges prefer objective tests, sometimes the judges prefer subjective tests. But what we have learned is that there is a way to appreciate a fact. If you look at the fact from the subjective knowledge perspective, you will make an argument of one kind, which in this case, the defense lawyer was making. If you look at objective fact, it will lead to a different consequence. The facts are the same, but it is your perspective that will give you the argument. So certainly, coming back to the simpler narration of fact, Yugal, do you want to try a simple narration of fact?
Yes, ma'am. I can. Ma'am, in this case, there are 2 warring factions, and ma'am, when one day disease is
Technically, there are 3. Technically, there are 3 warring factions.
Yeah. One day disease is traveling by the bus, and he's stopped by the persons of the other party, and he's given the merciless beating by the other sections of the party, and there were 20 injuries, out of which 9 injuries were grievous, and all these injuries cumulatively result into the death of the dead person. And the immediate cause of the death is the hemorrhage.
Okay.
Yes.
Here is my narration. So certainly there were warring factions in the village, and there is a history among these the accused person, accused party, and the deceased person, that there were so bad blood was there between Kamas and Reddys, and they have been filing criminal cases. So what's also important fact, which will help us determine intention, is that the deceased boarded the bus, and after that the accused also boarded the same bus. But the accused were going to a place farther than, their tickets also showed that they were going farther than where the accused was going. But when the deceased got down, the other also got down. The accused got down, so they cut short their journey. There is no suggestion, and this is not written here, but from the facts we know, that there is no suggestion that there was any pre-planning. So they boarded the bus, they found out that the accused was also sitting there, the victim was also sitting there, So when but when they saw the victim getting down, the accused also got down. And then they picked up heavy sticks from our local shop and started beating the accused person mercilessly, despite he and the other people saying stop. And they beat him up till he became unconscious. So he did not die at that point of time because of their injury. And the accused and the victim was taken to the hospital and he died there a day after. So the question is again the same, that with these 19 injuries found on his person, 9 of which were grievous, whether the accused person are liable for culpable homicide or they are liable for murder. So how many of you have still not read the case? You have to answer this question, that in your opinion, by having heard us in the previous case, by applying Virsa Singh, what do you think? Whether these 2 accused can be held guilty of murder by applying the test, objective, subjective test? Is there anyone who has not read the case? You can apply your mind. Or if all of you have read the case, then articulate. What do you think? How will you apply Virsa Singh's reasoning of the court, the test given by Virsa Singh, in this case to determine? The judges have used Virsa Singh in deciding this case.
I think it relates more to Kapoor Singh case and not Virsa Singh's case, because Virsa Singh, it was only 1 blow of spear given to him. Kapoor Singh case, they gave him 18 blows.
It's only no. When you apply the law, we do not say we are not saying compare the facts. Certainly on facts it is similar to, it's closer to Kapoor Singh. But I've asked you the job, just one second. The job I've asked you to think about is, by applying the reasoning given by Virsa Singh, Kapoor Singh stands overruled. Kapoor Singh is not a good law anymore after Virsa Singh. Virsa Singh has laid down a clear step. So we cannot apply the ruling. And one never, when we say precedent, one does not apply similar facts. The judge said culpable homicide, therefore culpable homicide. That's not how we decide cases. We refer to the law laid down. So law laid down in Virsa Singh is that in all cases where this question arises, you have to apply the 3 tests. If you apply those 4 tests, 3 objective, 1 subjective test. So applying those tests, whether this person, these 2 accused person can be held liable or not. Deepika wanted to say something, but there was somebody else also who has written in the chat box. We have got a new person. Sandeep has given us, yes, they are guilty of murder. So Sandeep, apply the test we have given, use that language, and then tell us step by step, why would you say that the answer is correct? We have to now get the correct reasoning. So why would you say that they are guilty of murder? Applying the test. No, Nirupam, you will not speak. Sandeep will speak. Sandeep, you have to give a chance to everybody to participate. Do you want to articulate, Sandeep? They have beaten him mercilessly, which means what? There were only 2 minutes left for this class. My alarm has told me next class is 2 minutes away. So we'll say the 17 injuries found by the medical have been given by the accused person. These were intended injuries. That is subjective part. They are not saying, oh, we intended to give him blow somewhere else and somebody else is also there. That's not the argument at all. They intentionally gave those injuries, but they're repeatedly being given. The only inference is they intended to cause those injuries. Objectively speaking, the cumulative effect of the injuries was that they were sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause death. So one injury, when we said act, it included acts. So here a series of acts have been committed. So cumulative effect of those, none of the injuries could have caused the death independently, but cumulatively they are all capable of causing, they are sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause death. So that is the scheme, that is the application of Virsa Singh. In the next class, we will learn, it's a tutorial class, so we have time. So in the next class, we will learn, Punaiya is more focused on distinguishing. And the question you are asking, how do you determine it is 299 or just 300? So the judge has again given us an educational case whereby they have explained to us the difference between 299 and 300, and then applying the test of the test given by Virsa Singh, they have said guilty of murder. So again, those of you,
Won't you
yes,
be taking the tutorial classes, because
I
we
will
have
be.
doubts some.
I will be. We'll complete this case and we'll still have some time. So we'll ask, we'll talk about questions Monday.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Because Monday we have not scheduled anything is for this
I have
season
one,
only. Yes, Saurabh?
ma'am, I have one doubt. Ma'am, can we
Mhm.
say that 303rdly and hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, ma'am, can we say 303rdly in addition of 304thly is equal to 301stly? Because
No.
in 303rdly there is no.
No, not necessarily, because fourthly necessarily requires imminently dangerous act. It may not be imminently dangerous act, but certainly what is correct, if you look at it, if you are referring to thirdly and fourthly by reference to knowledge and intention, then yes, in the firstly, knowledge and intention are there. If both of them are there, then so we will not have to go to the other categories. Somebody is saying any knowledge about exams. I do not have any knowledge about exams. You have to keep checking the website. We'll continue with the discussion. You can raise your questions on Monday. Keep holding on to your questions.
Thank you, ma'am.
So everybody has marked your presence. Meet on Monday.